Probably. Oh yeah, there's nobody in here, so I guess it's okay.
Yeah. Should I share my video? Hello.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce you, but you can get your screen ready to share.
Okay.
Welcome everybody to the 7 o'clock session of Scholars Day. We have 4 graduate students from the MSW MBA programs and the Doctorate of Nursing program here tonight. I think a few of our participants are running late, so we are going to get started with Jessica McNicholas from the MBA program. And Jessica is going to be presenting an exploration of student course satisfaction and its determinants in the content of virtual learning. So Jessica, we'll turn it over to you, and each presentation has about 15 to 20 minutes. So whenever you're ready.
All righty. Let's see here. Okay, can you see my?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, we can, Jessica.
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. So let me start. Now I'm going to minimize my view over here so I can see my entire slideshow. Okay, here we are. Okay, hello. So I'm Jessica McNicholas, and I am an MBA graduate student here at Carlow University. And I'm going to be presenting an exploration of student course satisfaction and its determinants in the context of virtual learning. So my motivation with this research is it's ongoing research that stemmed from original research last semester of my exploration of faculty-student interaction within the context of virtual education. And the research continued to find potential correlation with student course satisfaction. Is faculty interaction tied to student overall course satisfaction? Also, what is satisfaction? Is it the fulfillment of needs? Is it the fulfillment of expectations, the fulfillment of obligations, or is it the pleasure derived from the fulfillment of needs, expectations, and obligations? Is overall satisfaction lower in virtual learning environments than in face-to-face courses? Or are the determinants just different in virtual learning environments? What can be done to increase overall course satisfaction in virtual learning? My research questions are, number 1, what is satisfaction? And number 2, what is overall course satisfaction's role within virtual learning outcomes? For the purpose of this study, we'll explore what's known in the extant literature about the construct overall course satisfaction, definitions, types, uses, measurements, and effects on other constructs. My methodology was a systematic literature review that I conducted using Carlow University's online library to access large databases. And you can see I've listed, all of the databases here that I've used to search many phrases. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you'll see these on a table later. And I returned a total of 10,316 papers from this large search. After removing the duplicates, a total of 315 papers were screened. And once the relevant or irrelevant articles and duplicates were eliminated, there are 21 papers for review. I've created a partial list of papers examined that are listed in table 1 here. These included several key things for this research on satisfaction. you can see we have virtual classroom characteristics, key factors in determining student satisfaction in online courses, feedback, self-regulating learning, frequency, intensity, topicality of the online learning satisfaction, a comparison of learning outcomes in skill-based courses versus face-to-face format. And that is just a partial list of what I've returned from the search. And here's is the table that I mentioned. These numbers on the side, 1 through 6, represent the phrases that I used to search in all of these databases. And for each phrase, for each database, these are the numbers of papers returned. This is the diagram of the concluded systematic literature review. As you can see, I stated before, I started with a total of 10,312 papers. And we went through screening, I went through eligibility criteria, and through my exclusions, I ended up with a total number of 21 papers for review. And this is a core idea map of satisfaction construct, student course satisfaction in the context of higher education, and some of the determinants, perception of the quality of the course, communication, encouragement, feedback, individual communication, perception of the quality of the course material, perception of the quality of the instructor interaction, which includes the immediacy and frequency of the interaction. And my conclusions are the most suitable definition for the purposes of this study that I'm going to use for satisfaction is a judgment that a product or a service feature or the product or service itself provides pleasurable level of consumption related fulfillment. And the perspective of overall course satisfaction and its determinants from an organizational standpoint will enable analysis and improvements to current virtual learning programs. And by assessing the overall course satisfaction of students, the organization has an excellent opportunity to implement changes for an overall higher student retention rate due to high satisfaction. What is the role of overall course satisfaction in undergraduate and graduate virtual education? Well, there are several components potentially influencing a student's overall course satisfactions. Our perceptions of the course, including the content, the instructor interaction, including feedback and its immediacy, encouragement to the student, and how the instructor delivers information, which can be included in the course design. Another component of the student satisfaction taken into consideration for this research is the known information about predictions and determinants of overall student course satisfaction. I have collectively found that there is a gap in the literature pertaining to synchronous and asynchronous online learning within the context of virtual higher education. Most of the studies that I found were within the synchronous format. So what is the overall course satisfaction role in virtual learning outcomes? The literature provides potentially influential components to student overall course satisfaction. Correlation of all components considered is under investigation still. The papers found on the topic of student overall course satisfaction within the context of higher education shows promising correlations with various types of interaction, including student-instructor interactions. Components influencing all students' overall course satisfactions are perceptions of the course, including the content, instructor interaction, encouragement to the student, and how other instructors deliver information. These components show positive correlation to both overall student satisfaction and learning outcomes. Consideration for the length of time to complete the course requirements and the length of time as a higher education virtual learner could have potential to be a confounding variables about overall student course satisfaction and should be considered. The previously mentioned potentially confounding variables could have a big impact on overall course satisfaction. And as defined by Carlow University, learning outcomes are measurable statements that articulate at the beginning what the student should know, to be able to do, or as a value as a result of taking a course or completing a program. How could we measure overall course satisfaction? We can use statements like these and use a Likert style scale for these sets of questions or statements. Pertaining to learning outcomes, we can use the academic quality of the online class is on par with face-to-face classes I've taken. I have learned as much from this online class as I might have from a face-to-face version of this course. I learn more in online classes than in face-to-face classes. The quality of the learning experience in online classes is better than in face-to-face classes. And pertaining to user satisfaction, we could use, I would recommend this instructor to other students. I would recommend this online course to other students. I would take an online class at this university again in the future. I was very satisfied with this online class. Overall course satisfaction and its determinants shortcomings in virtual education and ways it can be improved. Again, there is a big gap in the literature pertaining to synchronous and asynchronous online learning within the context of virtual higher education. Although I found some literature with asynchronous virtual learning contributing to this research, the literature accessible through Carlow University's Grace Library is limited with the asynchronous context of virtual education. Several factors such as instructor interaction, including feedback, encouragement, how the instructor delivers information, could have a profound effect on the levels of overall course satisfaction and its determinants. And a way to improve this is to set a standard and protocols to promote the satisfaction determinants within the higher education institution. For future study, this literature review on overall course satisfaction and its determinants will be used in a study of first, its effect on online students' successful learning outcomes and satisfaction, and also for ways to increase satisfaction in online learning environments. My proposed research questions are, does a high level of perceived dialogue or interaction between instructor and students in asynchronous online courses lead to a higher level of student satisfaction? And number two, does a high level of perceived dialogue or interaction between the instructor and the students in asynchronous online courses lead to higher learning outcomes? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. I'm going to open it up for questions.
Okay.
Hi, Jessica. My name's Michael. Nice to meet you. Great job.
Hello, thank you.
So this goes along with your asynchronous versus synchronous. I'm definitely an auditory learner, so I like listening to a lecture. I think I gain a lot from listening to a lecture. So that's definitely a great idea for you, or for your proposed research question. So I just wanted to comment on that. And do you think there's any point in also looking at how assignments are done, like with group assignments being done virtually versus in person? Do you think there's any worth in looking at something like that? I think it's harder to find a group or get more involved in your group whenever you never meet them, at least in person. I think you connect better with people in person. versus online. Like, so what do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a fantastic idea. And I think that would fall under the course design. I myself here at Carlow University and am an asynchronous learner strictly. I have worked on individual projects and I have also worked on group projects. And it just so happens that I have made very, very close friends through this. And one of them happens to live in Oklahoma. And I could tell you we got straight A's. So that's just one little tidbit, but I do believe that's my experience. But something like that should definitely be considered. Those are definite variables, and I think that they would fall under the course design category, but certainly worth looking into.
Great. Thank you so much. And that's awesome. You found a friend like that.
Yeah, that we're like lifelong buddies now.
That's great. Thank you so much again, and great job.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jessica?
Yeah, Jessica.
Hello.
Hello, very interesting. I just have a question. You have done really a very extensive literature review of this concept of course satisfaction. What is the you have found to be the most either difficult part, challenging part that you could share, with the audience or you?
The most difficult thing for me with the previous research pertaining to faculty-student interaction or dialogue, and then continued with overall course satisfaction and learning outcomes, has greatly been finding papers on asynchronous virtual learning. That has been a struggle. And a lot of papers do not even disclose what sort of online learning environment they're studying or what their experiment was on. A lot of them will call it online learning, which I've defined, and that a lot of them will say e-learning, which they do define, but it does not clearly state whether it's synchronous or asynchronous. And I think it's certainly a challenge, and I think there would be great differences between the two. So that's my experience.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting.
I think we had another question here in the classroom, Dr. Twist.
Yes, thank you so much, Jessica. I was fascinated by your presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, it's great to hear that you made friends with somebody in Oklahoma.
Oh yeah, we're best buds.
And so you were doing group work together, is that right?
Correct. We did last semester, and I have another friend who I've actually not met in person, but she lives in Oakmont, so not too far. And we've worked on group projects for 3 semesters in a row. So we're really close, and we are like a well-oiled machine.
That's great. My
Yeah.
question about doing the group work. I have a student in Utah right now, and we do a lot of group work in some of the classes that we do. And I wondered if you found it at all challenging to deal with time zone differences when you were scheduling work together.
Well, my girlfriend who lives in Oklahoma is just an hour behind. And we're all in our groups, and we're all full-time working professionals. I work at West Penn Hospital. I am a scientist in flow cytometry there. She happens to be a director of a laboratory and respiratory therapy in Oklahoma. And my other friend, longtime group partner, she is a director of infection prevention at Shadyside. So we would wait for, her name is Kim in Oklahoma. We would wait to make sure it was a good time for her to get home. So we did what we had to do, and we did a lot of teams meets.
Yes, that's
So-
great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? We might have some time after all of our presenters present. So if anybody has a question for Jessica, Jessica, if you're able to stay for the rest of the evening, maybe we'll have some questions for you
Sure.
later on. All
Thank
right.
you.
So thank you so much. Great job. We have another presenter that has arrived in the classroom. So I'm just going to ask everyone to give us about 2 minutes to pull up the slides because we didn't have them previously. So I'm just going to mute and turn off the screen so that we can get our next presenter set up with her slides. So give me 1 minute. All right. Thank you all so much for your patience. We had a little technical glitch, but we are ready to go. And up next, we have Lamica Davenport from the MSW program. And Lamica is going to be presenting on the issue of defunding the police, why funds should be reallocated into crisis intervention. So again, you have about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will turn it over for questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So, hello, my name is Lamica Davenport, and again, I'm here to discuss the topic of defunding the police and reallocating the funds into crisis intervention. So in supporting the overall well-being of an individual and changes to racial inequalities, it must be considered how interactions and the paternalistic views of law enforcement are not beneficial to the Black community. Black people are killed at alarming percentages by police. Crisis intervention would benefit all communities, but especially the Black community, where there is a known stigma towards mental health and mental issues, or mental illness, I'm sorry. In escalated situations that require law enforcement intervention, an officer not trained in crisis intervention may associate the behavior as a threat, which could be why police killings are one of the leading causes of death for Black men. Utilizing crisis intervention officers as first responders is a more ethical approach and should receive funding as it is fully supported by the MSW Code of Ethics and a principle of social welfare. So some may ask, why do the funds need to be reallocated towards crisis intervention? Well, first, I must say that defunding the police is not stating that society fully should remove the role of law enforcement. A lot of people do think that, that means that we would just completely function in a society where police would be non-existent, but that is not what defunding the police means. It means that a portion of the millions of dollars that police departments receive for funding should be utilized to support crisis intervention and first responders for the following reasons. Police violence is a leading cause of death for Black men. Nonviolent encounters such as traffic stops, noise complaints, or wellness checks are ending in fatalities. It is more ethical to use trained crisis intervention responders when appropriate. Crisis intervention teams have a strong focus on de-escalating situations while also allowing the individual to maintain their dignity and respect. And although police officers receive some training on crisis intervention, it's not always enough, and that is easily observed due to the amount of Black people who died due to the encounters with the police. So, as I mentioned earlier, crisis intervention would benefit all communities with the emphasis on the Black community who has lost trust and confidence in law enforcement for various reasons. The Black community also has a known stigma towards mental illness and mental health. In a Black household, it's not common to be seen by a psychiatrist or therapist when you're experiencing life-changing issues. Most Black families rely on religion and faith to guide them through their issues, and there's nothing wrong with that, absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, this approach does kind of take away that there are real mental issues, and mental health care often is overlooked, buried, or self-medicated. A lot of Black people also do not have trust in the healthcare system due to health disparities. Many do not want to experience the double discrimination of being Black and having mental health issues. So how this correlates to police killings is that when a cop approaches a Black person, immediately they feel they are a threat, and the mental state or concern is out the window. Situations are not approached with the mindset of de-escalating, but instead approached with the mindset of removing the threat. So, as the quote here states, 1 in 4 fatal police shootings between 2015 and 2020 involved a person with a mental illness, and an estimated 44% of people incarcerated in jail and 37% of people incarcerated in prison have a mental health condition, with 2 million people with mental illness booked into the nation's jails every year. This quote from the National Alliance of Mental Illness advises police officers encounter a high amount of individuals with mental health issues. Police officers have a paternalistic view when handling situations. This means they will exercise their power to prevent others from harm if a threat is identified. This does not always support social welfare in communities, especially because what constitutes as a threat is debatable. Officers tend to move quickly. They need to move quickly to assess and to protect. They see a threat and immediately attempt to remove it. This is how they were trained. And in certain situations, though, unconscious bias can play a huge part into what is a threat. So from an ethical view, crisis intervention and defunding the police to support it poses a question for ethics. As mentioned in the last slide, police officers tend to have a paternalistic perspective. In social work, it's described as power that can be rightfully exercised against will to prevent harms to others. The opposition to this perspective is the utilitarian perspective. Sorry, that word always gets me, which supports that action can be justified based on the goodness of the consequence. Paternalism doesn't fully support self-determination, where utilitarianism does. Utilitarianism would look at how the outcome of a situation is going to impact the individual on the long run. So, for example, there was a show that was called, I believe it's called Station 19, and it's on ABC. And what comes to mind when I think of the utilitarian perspective is this one specific scene where they have the firefighters show up as first responders, and they show up to a building that a young girl and her mother are refusing to evacuate, more so the young girl than the mother, because of the simple fact that the building is under like some kind of threat that something is about to happen to the building where it might collapse, and they need to get the mother out who is disabled, but the daughter is kind of having a mental break in the moment and feels like it's not the right thing to do. So at that time, from a utilitarian perspective, the characters on that show actually were able to talk her down. They were all crisis intervention trained. They explained to her, that there was nothing to be concerned about and that she should come out of the room so that they can help and get them out of the building. So they really, really had a high focus on getting them out of the building and de-escalating the situation. So, just a second. So when it comes to paternalism, on the other hand, basically they would make the safety of others a priority. So there's also an example that was a true story of something that happened in San Francisco, where there was a lady who had a known mental health issue. And basically she had a butter knife and started to charge at the police officers, and to protect themselves, they did disarm her by shooting her, and she unfortunately did pass away. Now, both perspectives can be justified in some sense. So as far as the impact of social work, it can be argued that social workers have a responsibility to support crisis intervention per the MSW Code of Ethics. So basically, social workers should advocate for living conditions conducive to the fulfillment of basic human needs, and should promote social, economic, political, and cultural values and institutions that are compatible with the realization of social justice. Crisis intervention and its alignment with the Act utilitarian perspective align with the promotion of social justice, and fighting against oppression and systems that support it is all part of what we would fight for as social workers and part of our code of ethics. So with that being said, supporting crisis intervention, especially in Black communities, aligns with the multiple MSW code of ethics standards for the client and the community. Multiple states are already implementing some form of mental health crisis intervention. In Allegheny County, we have Resolve Crisis. They offer a mobile crisis team that can travel anywhere within Allegheny County to respond to a crisis and provide face-to-face support. Other cities, such as San Francisco, have been sending crisis intervention responders with first responders. This all supports the utilitarian perspective in which the end consequence is potentially saving a life. Changing the look of the first responder would better serve individuals in the Black community who may or may not be facing mental health issues. It may install more trust in a system that has been failing Black people. Crisis intervention is morally justified. I want to leave you with the quote that's shown at the bottom. We believe that every person in a crisis and their family should receive a humane response that treats them with dignity and connects them to appropriate and timely care. Being in a crisis should not lead to a fatality. Thank you.
Any questions for Lamica?
Yes, I have a question. It's very interesting. Your argument for the need to have health crisis intervention is definitely very convincing. But what is not clear to me is that requires defining the police. Why cannot just the police keep its funds or increase its fund and create this health crisis, mental health crisis intervention which is needed?
So during a lot of the recent, in 2020, there was a lot of killings that had transpired that were with police involved. And that kind of started the conversation of defunding the police. And that was kind of where this all led from, as to like, what can we do with the funds if we did defund them? So it's kind of why it was like on the topic of defunding them, this is kind of something that we could think about using the funds towards, because at the time when they were discussing the whole defunding the police, a lot of people were questioning, kind of like what you said, well, what would we do with the funds? And a lot of different organizations had a lot of valid different ideas as to what we could do with those funds if we were to defund them. But this is just one situation that I feel like, I'm sorry, I'm sitting right in front of the camera. This is one scenario that I feel like if we were to defund the police, this would be a really, really good way to use the funds.
Yeah, because I think this is a worthy cause, a worthy initiative independently, from the defunding or funding the police, probably shouldn't be tied to that, because you get to a much more complicated fight, right? This is a very convincing argument that we must create a mental health crisis intervention force. Very interesting. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you hear me? My name is Rob.
Hi, Robin.
Great job on your presentation. I just have one little question. What would happen if the crisis intervention team were to fail to de-escalate the situation? Would you then need the police as backup, or would there be somebody else to back them up?
So I don't fully have the answer to how every state conducts it, or anything of that sort, but I do know that certain cities and certain states do actually still have law enforcement show up. It's just that the first responders would, well, I don't want to say the first responders, they would kind of all show up like together collaboratively, and those who are trained in crisis intervention would try to de-escalate the situation, and obviously like law enforcement would be on standby. I'm just not sure if every single state is actually doing it in that manner. But from my understanding, I believe the states that are participating in it, if they do feel like the crisis could escalate or could turn into something that would be out of their control, they would also have law enforcement there.
So then we wouldn't want to defund the police if we would still need them.
So this is more so whenever you say like defund the police, it was because of the conversation of defunding them and the things that we can kind of utilize the money for. The reason why a lot of people say like defund the police is because the police do receive millions and millions that would go towards certain things as new equipment, training. For instance, if you're familiar with like the body cameras, that was a huge initiative that kind of inflated the amount of money that they would have received. So things of that sort were kind of like why the conversation and where it's stimulated from, as far as like defunding, because a lot of the funding is going into a lot of things that currently kind of were initiatives that were like started off of the killings of Black people. For instance, the body cams were actually from the killing, I believe, of Michael Brown. So whenever that kind of happened, a lot of people started to think, okay, well, we are coming up with these different initiatives and putting more funding into it. What would happen if we did the funding elsewhere into other resources that could also benefit de-escalation? So that's kind of how that kind of conversation stemmed.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Davenport. I have a quick question.
Sure. Hi. Thank you.
Hi. So I just want to say I really enjoyed your presentation a lot. This subject is particularly interesting to me every time we talk about it. But I just wanted to say, I think the questions the professor asked, and Robin as well, I think the presentation was really good, but I wish there was a little bit of information about, specifically Allegheny County. How much money are the police getting that they really don't need that could be reallocated for whatever A, B, C, whatever reason? I think there was like a lot of cliffhangers. Like there's a lot of information that now I want to research further, because I want to know, kind of how resolve is involved here and how much more they could be used in certain situations, specific to killings of Black people. I think a lot of the people are mistaken their mental health issues for, being combative and X, Y, and Z, but really, crisis or intervention could really have been extremely helpful in those situations and could have prevented a lot of that. So if we could defund, a few million to put it into, more crew and resolve and X, Y, and Z, I just think that would have kind of solidified your idea. But I just want to say it was really good. I really enjoyed it, and you did a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, unfortunately, I don't have all the answers as far as like the specific figures that each county or each city is receiving in regards to like currently for the police departments and things of that sort. And it honestly, it's one of those topics that was kind of like a trending topic in a sense as to like, if we did defund them, what will we do with it?
Exactly.
That was kind of like what kind of stemmed the conversation. A lot of articles that are kind of out there will explain like, if we did defund them, we could put it here, we could put it there. And so that was kind of where this kind of presentation and this report also came from, is just kind of thinking about what we could kind of do with it. And not super statistical, but just kind of saying like everything that we could possibly build from it if we were to actually defund the police. So I appreciate that.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure. I don't think so.
I don't know if there's one at home. I think both you and I have a question though.
Sure.
So go ahead. So Lamica, first, it's a real pleasure to see you in person.
I know. Thank you.
Online class, so I'm delighted to see your presentation.
Thank you.
And I wondered how much of the controversy around this topic, this is a little bit off your presentation, but I often wonder how much the controversy around this topic is about the term defund as opposed to reallocate.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And looking in it, some of the concern I've seen and some of the other work you've done relates to, things we don't often pay much attention to. For example, expenditures on hyper military type equipment that would normally be seen on a battlefield being purchased for local police.
Yes.
That's sort of what people talk about as the militarization of the police. And so I just wondered if you think the choice of the term defund the police as a slogan has worked against some of the conversation about where we maybe need to head.
I think you have a great point. I definitely agree with that. I think honestly, when I opened up the presentation, I mentioned that like when you hear the words defund, don't instantly think that that means remove or think that that means like law enforcement isn't needed, because I think it has a negative, a negative connotation that basically people immediately hear it and they think that it means that we would basically pull some type of resource from the police. And I'm not saying that they're being excessive in some of the things that they do purchase, but to your point, a local county or a local, like for instance, if you're from the Pittsburgh area, Washington County really probably does not need body armor for their area because they don't deal with many situations where they would need to pull body armor out. So if they actually did have money that was going towards body armor, that could be something that we could pull from. So I do think that, you hear the words defund and it instantly kind of brings this like negativity around it, but it's truly just to kind of say that there are a little bit of things that we can kind of pull from that and create even better resources that would help the community.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
There was a question in the chat. Sure, yes. So this was from Katie. Just one question. Do you think that funds could be used for more in-person training and learning versus computer and virtual learning when it comes to on-the-job training should be funded instead? Have you seen any research that has supported that in-person training is more effective when it comes to this application?
Yeah, so actually there was specifically a specific scenario, I believe that happened in the 80s that started crisis training within police departments. And I'm sorry, I have this written down, but it's just not all in my head right now, the specific situation. But there was a killing of a Black man who also had mental health issues, and it kind of sparked this crisis intervention training within police departments. But that was also in the 80s, and kind of bringing it back to terms of where we are now. If they are doing training, I don't want to sound negative in saying that it's not really, how can I put this? It's not really as beneficial as I think that people would think it should be, especially since if we had this issue in the 80s and we kind of still have it escalating now and continuing now, then it's not very beneficial. And then honestly, you also have to think about the training that police receive, where they really do get trained to act quickly. There's a lot of studies that actually show like different trainings that you can actually find online where you can kind of jump in and see the little bit of things that they go through. Like, what would you see at a flash? And, what would you do if you've seen something like flashing at you? Do you see that it's a candy bar? Or do you see that it's a gun? Like, they really have like a very quick motive that they have to jump with. So that's also combined with that crisis intervention training. And I'm not sure which one would kind of take heed over the other. But yeah, they have some level of training. I just don't believe that it's as in-depth as it could be to really benefit the community, like crisis intervention first responders would.
Great. So my question was, just hearing everybody else's question about the word defunding. And this is the beauty of actually presenting and talking through your research. Would you maybe reword that to be something like adding crisis intervention to police services? Or how might you kind of get rid of that negative attachment to the word defunding and change it to maybe take it a little step further going forward publicly?
So a piece of me thinks like, if I wanted to kind of soften things up, yes, I could change the word. However, I don't think that I would change the word, because I do feel like it is one of those topics that it does need to make people feel uncomfortable, because it's a huge topic and it really is a part of people's real lives. I mean, it sounds terrible to say, let's rip money away. But when you also think of the greater scheme, think of the phone call that the mother gets when she finds out that her son was stopped at just a traffic stop and he will never be coming home, or a wife, or when you find out your kid who was in the yard playing with a squirt gun ended up running into a cop and was killed, like it happened in Ohio. Like, these are real scenarios. So I think that anything that kind of like makes that a little bit uncomfortable and really makes you think is worth it. So I'm actually a little bit proud that the word defund kind of ruffles a little feathers, because I think it makes you really want to look more into it as to what can we do? What does that mean? What do we need to do? And that would make me want to keep the topic the same, the subject the same.
Yeah, great answer.
Thank you.
All right, are there any more questions from the audience, the virtual audience?
Thank you, guys. Oh, wait, was there somebody else?
A question, yes. So crisis intervention is great. But do you think there is an age limitation to it? And also, with so many school shootings that have happened, do you think there is a role in crisis intervention in the schools or even in high school?
So as far as the age situation, I wouldn't be able to really speak too far into that, because I didn't really look as far as how it impacts each different age group. So I'm sorry, I would have to kind of look into that a little bit further. From the school perspective, and I don't want to get too off the realm, but I will say, like, I think that each area could use uniformity, because I know that there are certain schools and certain districts that do have full police officers on site, while there are some schools that don't. And with crisis intervention, there's some schools that actually do have like people who are able to kind of help in scenarios where some don't. So I think it's one of those things where it would just have to be uniformity amongst everybody. But I also don't want to jump too deep into that, because my research didn't go into the school aspect as much.
All right, thank you. And I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. My name is Kendra. Great presentation. And I really think that you hit it on the head as far as mental health being an issue. I did put something in the chat, but just to verbalize it, mental health has always been an issue with police and in the judicial system. So I applaud you for, taking this presentation. It's uncomfortable, but it needs to be spoken on. It needs to be heard. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right, we may have another minute for questions for both of our presenters, but we do have another presenter. Tiffany, are you with us virtually? Tiffany Johnson? Tiffany, if you're there, you might be muted. I want to give you another minute to take the opportunity for your presentation. No, and we had one other presenter, Samantha. Is Samantha, by chance, virtually available for presentation? No. All right. Well, unfortunately, of our 4 presenters, 2 of them were unable to join us tonight. So with the next couple minutes, I just wanted to ask if anybody had any questions for either Lamica or Jessica about their presentations tonight, since we have some extra time here. Any outstanding questions?
I would just like to say congratulations to my fellow classmate on her presentation here at Carlow Scholars Day. And that's it for me.
Yeah, and congratulations to you too, Jessica, on your presentation.
Thank
I think that you both did amazing. You both had great topics. Jessica's really kind of, I think the professors in the room really could stand to learn a lot from the research that you did about online learning versus in-person learning. And Lamica, of course, this is a topic that is of interest to everybody in the university and beyond. So I do apologize for those of you at home. I don't think that you were able to see Lamica's slides, but if you want, I can just try to open them back up really quickly and flash through them, except I am unable to.
You can share.
In the Zoom, you're going to see some Zoom buttons. There's one green with an arrow pointing up that says share screen.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
At home? At virtually? Can my virtual?
I'm not seeing here.
I'm not seeing
Not
it.
at home.
The share screen should be at the bottom toolbar.
Yeah, I have the share screen, but
Did you select desktop?
The Scholars Day presentation, there you go.
Now
There
you're
it is.
sharing. Yeah. Mhm.
huh. Well, I do apologize, but let me can I close this out? So Lamica, I apologize that the audience, the virtual audience wasn't able to see your slides because of our technical challenges here, but I'm going to just leave these slides up. We'll just take a minute if anyone wants to look through them. They were beautifully done. So I do apologize that we weren't able to share those properly. I thank everybody for attending. If there's no more questions and neither of our 2 other participants are in the virtual world with us, I think that we will end early tonight. Dr. Twist.
I just want to make sure that I'm not sure that the other presenter was able to hear Lamica congratulating her back.
Oh,
Because of the
oh yeah.
voice quality, so I just wanted to make sure she.
Yeah, Jessica, did you hear Lamica congratulated you back too?
Okay, thank you. And I know I did not, so that was a good thing there.
Great, great. All right. Anything else before we close for the evening?
Thank you to the committee.
Yes. Yes, and thank you to both of you for putting these presentations together and taking the time to share them with us. I think they've both been very informative, and I know I will be taking some things away tonight from them both. So thank you, and everybody have a great night.
You too.